Welcome to the Modern Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Pardee. This podcast, along with my private practice in LA and my newsletter, all are aimed to providing you evidence-based information around preventative medicine, longevity, and health in general. Join me in dispelling health myths as well as cutting through the noise that is social media. I hope that whether you want to optimize your performance or just in general get healthier, the Modern Wellness Podcast will help you do that. Today, I was joined by Emma Payne, who's a seasoned technology entrepreneur and MIT graduate who started to build online communities before Netscape was born. She's the founder and CEO of Help Texts that bring ongoing, accessible, expert grief and mental health support globally via text message. Emma combines her personal grief experience, which we talked about today, along with her 25 years in tech to provide people with thoughtful, practical support that really works straight to their phones. This podcast episode was deeply personal to me, and it was one of my favorite podcast episodes that I've ever recorded to date. I was able to connect with somebody who I feel like I have somewhat of a shared experience with. And I was able to talk about the death of my former partner, Ian, who died of an overdose when he was 33. We talked about both of our grieving experiences, what that was like for us, the things that we wish we had, the things that we did that felt really weird. All in all, it was a really human conversation, and I left feeling very connected to Emma and really grateful for the conversation that we had. I really hope you can leave this podcast with a greater understanding of what grief is like for different people, how to show up for people who are grieving in maybe a more helpful way, and start to view this idea of grief as a muscle that we can exercise when other people are grieving in terms of how to show up for them, how to speak to them, what to say, what to do that may help them through the process. Understanding that if we're all going to live a really long time on this planet, we're eventually going to go through some sort of grief ourselves. If you think this podcast could be helpful for anyone, please share it, and thank you for listening. All right, Emma, thank you so much for joining. You and I met like 1 or 2 weeks ago, just recently, and we jumped on a call about another project, which we can chat about today. But I was interested in your work in grief, and we quickly connected on the fact that we had both lost people, and your late husband, Barry. And the thing that really caught me was that when I told you that I had lost a former partner, the first thing that you said, I don't know if you remember, is what was his name? And like you almost caught me off guard. I was like, and then I reflected on it after our call, and it was this thing that people don't usually ask that right away. Like it's not the first question that they ask. And it was really meaningful to me to say his name and like acknowledge him. And you acknowledged like this was a person that I loved deeply and you wanted to know his name. And I just wanted to say that. And it was the thing that stuck with me. I was like, oh, wow, that feels really good to say his name out loud because it had been a few years since he's passed. And it's nice to acknowledge people in that way.
Yeah, it was a really, because I think that they also both were the same age when they died. Is that what we discovered? Yeah.
Yeah, they were both 33 when they passed.
Yeah. The asking the name, I wish that if only one thing is accomplished by my time in this work, that would be it. We actually do send texts and nudges to friends and family with this just most simple piece of advice because friends and family do want to help. They just genuinely don't know how. And in our society, we've kind of swung too far the other way, which is like, don't mention it, don't bring him up. That might really upset Mary. But actually, you're already upset, right? You're already grieving. And having a chance to make him real and bring him into the conversation is actually a real gift. I've yet to hear anybody that say otherwise. Everybody has the same experience you did. This thing ever. It might feel awkward the first few times you do it, but very quickly it won't. It's a muscle that we can all grow. that when someone tells us someone has died, just ask about them. If it's their partner, whoever, just ask about them.
Yeah, like tell me about her.
Yeah,
What was her name? Yeah,
yeah,
so simple.
yeah.
And I will tell you from firsthand experience, I've told a lot of people that he's passed, and you left an impression on me where I was like, wow, I want to leave people feeling like I felt when I left the conversation with Emma. Like that felt really beautiful. It was also an immediate like vulnerability connector where I just felt more connected to you. You shared your story. And I think there's so many times where I leave conversations, probably on me, like I need to figure this out, but that you don't feel super connected to the
Mm-hmm.
person always. And what would be the difference in the world if we felt that human connection more often?
Mm-hmm. Grief is so isolating. So here we are in a world where arguably loneliness is the most devastating health thing that's happening. Bereavement is one of the loneliest times in our lives, and we will all experience it. It's not unusual. We're all going to, if we live long lives and if we're living good lives, then we have connections and we will lose connections. But yet we make grief this lonely time when in fact it's not just a net neutral. This is the other thing that I think. It's not just that you don't hear from people and that feels lonely. It's also that if you do, even when it's someone you have met never before and you're talking to them over Zoom for 5 minutes and they ask you a person's name, you can feel a connection. So it's not to a neutral, it's that we plunge into loneliness and feeling disconnected and alone when in fact it's a huge opportunity for connection. Loss and painful life experiences in general bring us together, right? It's a way that we can connect. Do you want to share
Yeah.
his name?
Yeah, his name was Ian. He was my former partner. He passed when he was 33 of an overdose, and and I miss him dearly every single day. So like asking his name was, yeah, it was really sweet to acknowledge him. And it's had a huge impact on my life. It's had a huge impact on how I practice medicine, how I connect with humans, how I prioritize things in my life or deprioritize things in my life,
Mm,
how I view the world, how my values have changed since
mm,
he passed. Um, I really talk about him as like he was one of, if not my biggest teachers in life so far. And I know I'll have others, but um, I look back after he passed and he was just like this. He was this very wise, beyond his years person. Like some of the things that he said didn't make sense in the time. And now I look back and I was like, oh, wow, like he got it a little bit more than I had got it because I was young when we were together. Um,
how
but
old
yeah,
were
and,
you when you
and
met him?
I was 21 or 22 when we met.
I was 19 when I met Barry. I think about that now too. Like I was just so young then.
Young,
Yeah.
young. Can you tell me about your story, how you got here, in terms of your story with Barry and how you ended up with help texts?
Yeah, sure. And I will say that after our conversation, the thing that really sat with me was the same as you, that little very quick connection. But also after we hung up, I was full of questions about how that experience must be influencing your work and how you approach it. So I'd love to chat more about that
Hmm.
when we get there. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I had about 20 years experience working in web and mobile. I had done lots of projects that I was proud of. I'd founded a nonprofit for women in tech. I'd done youth voter registration, caregiver coordination for families with a child with a disability, things like that. So I had quite a lot of web mobile development experience. My first startup was pre Netscape. So that's how old I am.
I haven't heard that word in a long time.
I know, like we would hand code HTML. It's crazy. But anyway, that was the world that I was in. I had just written a book for HarperCollins. Like everything was going
Mm.
amazingly, and then Barry died by suicide. Like I had no. It was my first loss. It was my first sudden traumatic loss. I had no frame of reference for it. The wall behind me when I've heard the news was orange, and I remember that I dropped down Like it was my time, I just never had the experience of your knees actually buckling. And I dropped down the wall, and I remember actually hearing or sensing a tear of that
Mm.
thing. Like somehow
Yeah.
I knew like instantly that everything was different and was always going to be different. One of the things I found really tough is when people would say, just get back to normal. You'll meet someone else. You'll get back to
Mm.
normal. Don't let this change you. And like this pressure to somehow not be changed from this fundamentally altering experience. Like, so yeah, it was brutal in all the ways
Yeah.
that I know you understand. I had no, I mean, I couldn't tie my shoes.
Yeah.
I went from
Yeah.
like writing for HarperCollins and running a company and all of this to not being able to tie my shoes. I couldn't read for a year. I started trying to do crosswords and I couldn't get a word into it. So that was my grief journey, and sort of slowly but surely came out of it, and was lucky to have a sister who moved out to be with me, and to have some support. But I found it very, very isolating, very isolating. And
Yeah.
then 10 years later, a dear friend of mine had a terminal cancer diagnosis, and I was spending a lot of time with him. And he was Barry's best friend and had been our best man, and they were also second cousins. And it was my first time being bedside with somebody as they died. And he had asked me to speak at his funeral, which I agreed to do. But that meant traveling back to Barry's hometown and standing in
Mm.
front of Barry's aunts and cousins and friends and our college friends and so on. And so I heard some version of, I'm sorry I didn't reach out back then. I didn't know what to say, probably
Mm-hmm.
200 times through the pub night, through all of it. And when I was flying home, I just thought, like, that's so awful. I
Yeah.
spent 10 years not hearing from people, and 100 plus, hundreds of people spent the same 10 years genuinely feeling bad about it. It's not that they didn't care. It's not that they were angry with me or all the other things I invented in my head. There's so much stigma, right, about overdose and suicide. And so you also get good at inventing things that people might be thinking. Or so really, that it was actually really the second funeral. The first funeral, like I said, I couldn't even tie my shoes. But by the time a decade had passed and I had the second experience, that was what made me sort of put two and two together about how I could live in the middle of my own Venn diagram and take all my web and mobile experience and apply it to grief. And once I started looking, I saw that it was a vacuum, just a
Yeah.
vacuum and a public health crisis, and also a pretty easy opportunity to help people feel supported, because there's this clear moment in time, right? It's not like other public health challenges like obesity or smoking, or like with bereavement, this thing happens right here, and you are now at increased risk for everything. The things you would expect: depression, substance misuse, sleep issues, but things you might not expect: diabetes, cancer, illness, inflammation, so suicide. So we have this moment where that is clear, and then we have a society that's not great at even asking the person's name, and all of these very serious and costly health, mental and physical health implications. So then I got to be in my bonnet, and I basically haven't shut up about it since then.
Thank
um,
you. Thank.
so I started help texts started working on it in 2016 after that funeral. Launched the company in 2018 by selling my house, which everyone thought was insane. Maybe it was. And now we're delivering clinically sound, tailored grief support via text for a full year. And it's tailored based on a bunch of things: cause of death, age, relationship, so on. So if your child was stillborn, different text than if your mom died of cancer, different text than if your partner died of an overdose.
Mm-hmm.
We were first in the world to get data published about grief-informed texting, and we have a kind of almost, to me still, it's a bit surreal how well it works. It's a 95% acceptability rate. Even though people are in these, what feels so, and maybe it's not even though, maybe it's because people are in deep pain and feeling isolated, that those texts that always say the name,
Mm-hmm.
your name, his name,
Mm-hmm.
they resonate and they feel really important to people, and they help people through the first year of anniversaries and so on. People can keep going as well, but generally our subscriptions start at a year.
So beautiful. I wanted to interrupt you earlier when you were telling the story about just when you heard about Barry's death. Well, for those who are just listening, like I got super emotional hearing your story because I understand a piece of it. I obviously don't understand your exact experience of it. Um, but I think anybody who has lost somebody who is really close to them knows exactly where they were and
Mm-hmm.
everything that happened when they heard that the person was gone. And it is like this moment that stands in time. I totally get the knees buck. For me, it was like I primally screamed, like top of my lungs, never screamed like that in my life, never screamed like that since that moment. Um, and it's just this like super primal human experience in that. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. And thank you for sharing it.
No, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's primal, all right. It's um, I just listened to a really interesting interview actually, uh, talking about birth and death. Like
Mm,
it's also
mm,
primal, right? The first time that I was giving birth, I literally had packed three different like Lululemon tops that I thought I would change in and out of during labor so that I would, not be splayed all over the place. Like I thought I was going to be very organized about this. And
yeah.
then and then when I was actually in labor, I didn't even wait to get into the room before I stripped it. Like I stripped naked in the entryway, screaming and whatever. I still find it hilarious that the intellectual me versus the primal me are completely like different humans.
You didn't put like option 2 on for that scene?
um
Oh.
and there is something, yeah, yeah, I guess primal is right. I hadn't really heard it said that way. You're right, but it's like it's primal because you can't
I-
believe it, right? I mean, apart from anything else, it's I mean, when it was happening to me, I didn't know anything about grief really, but and now I've read a lot about it. But the actual neuroscience is fascinating. The fact that the brain is like a predictive organ, and so you can logically know somebody is gone, but you actually can't stop thinking they're going to walk through the door or be at the
Mm.
end of the swimming pool to pass you the towel or whichever thing. And so there's also that actual disbelief. I think that that was also just something I hadn't experienced before, like actual, not just, oh, I can't believe it, but no, actually, I actually can't. I cannot believe
Your
it.
brain can't put the two things together. Like there's
Yeah.
like an actual block in, yeah, I totally understand that. I had this weird moment months after he passed where I was walking through an airport and I saw him.
Mm,
And I had this excitement feeling like that was a true, like, oh, and then there was this
mm-hmm,
moment of disbelief again in a different way, like a subtle, like, oh gosh, he's gone. And then, the realization of like what just happened, like how did I even believe that he wasn't gone? There
mm-hmm,
was like this lack of connection there, and it happened to me a few times, whether it was dreams or
mm-hmm,
um going to reach for he was the person I called when I got in the car. Like for me, I call people in the car,
mm-hmm,
and he was like the first number.
mm,
And yeah, many times getting into the car, reached for the phone and went to and was like, how can I not push his number right now? But yeah, I totally get that. Your
But
story, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the predictive brain in full swing. There's a wonderful book called The Grieving Brain, written by Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, who's one of our expert contributors who writes texts with us that we send to grievers. But for anybody interested in this and the actual impacts on our brain, it's fascinating. And then just this year, she wrote a second book, which is The Grieving Body, which really gets into the science of the physical impacts on us. It's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what is grief? Like, what is the study of grief? Like, what are we talking about here?
So there is a area of study called thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. So my chief clinical officer and my clinical team are all certified thanatologists. And I have yet to, I cannot understand why, well, I guess I can, but it is unfortunate that more people didn't recognize the importance and value of this field. Thanatologists and people who work in end of life and bereavement are the most amazing humans on earth. Yeah, just great, and have taught me. So, I mean, I'm just a techie with lived experience. They're the ones that have taught me. So thanatology is the field, and grief I've heard defined lots of different ways, but one of my favorites comes from a physician named B.J. Miller, who says that grief is the gap between what you have and what you wish you had, which I like a lot. It's an
Yeah.
interesting way of putting it. And there are lots of there are current theoretical models that people use to talk about grief. There's also lots of misinformation about grief, as in lots of fields. So, for example, there are no stages of grief. People think that that's a
We got to get into
thing.
that. That's like a mic drop moment. I'm like, what?
I actually just delivered a keynote on the weekend, and that was my first slide when I'm speaking to grievers. In this case, I'm speaking to a room of 400 newly bereaved people. And the idea that is commonplace, that there are 5 stages of grief and that you're going to go through them, is so harmful and frustrating to the griever themselves. I mean, I don't know about you, but I spent easily as much time being sad about Barry being dead as I did beating myself up about not grieving correctly or quickly enough or being where I thought I should be. But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote the stages of grief, was never writing about how we feel when someone dies. That wasn't the work that she was doing. It was also kind of lost in translation because she wrote in different languages. We work with her foundation and her son, and it's just a misinterpretation of some really important work that she was doing with people who themselves were dying. But somehow it sort of caught on, and now people think they're supposed to go through stages, and it's a real shame because it makes people feel frustrated with themselves at a time that they should just be going, hey, I'm in this experience, I'm doing the best I can, I'm feeling lots of things, and I'm going to be gentle with myself as I do. And for friends and families and managers and colleagues, it would be best for everyone else to also know that it's not going to advance in a linear way, that we're not waiting for Mary to stop missing Ian. Like, we're not all sitting around here waiting for a progression. It's just a normal, natural life experience. Grief is a normal, natural response to a human process.
Yeah. I think
It's
that's so important to realize. And I think, I've definitely had my doubts in terms of my own grief in that. And I think it's really important to say out loud that it's a natural process that people will go through
mm-hmm,
in response to loss. But I'm also confused because I'm like, okay, stages of grief are not real. I'm like, what? Because I experienced a lot of them.
mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about why you say they're not like that's not what she was talking about? Because and a little overview because I can't rattle them off, but it's like anger, bargaining. I totally bargained when Ian died. I even like I don't feel comfortable sharing it out loud, but sometimes I would say, what if this person was gone
Yeah.
and he was back? It's like weird things. You're like, that's not, this isn't a game show. Like you can't
Yeah.
go down
I
like
was
door
like, okay,
number
which
two.
limb would I give? Okay, if I didn't have my
Yeah.
left arm, would that be fine? Sure, I'll do it. Uh,
It's weird. Yeah, you make these things where you're like, what if I did this swap? And I'm like, there's no, like,
yeah.
logically, you know that it's crazy, but your
Yeah.
brain
Elizabeth
is,
Kubler-Ross's work was super important, and the things that she describes are things that lots of us feel lots of times in lots of orders. It's the stages idea. It's that you felt what you felt when you felt it. And if you felt it again 6 months later, that's fine. Or 6 years
mm,
later, we just kind of, the cliche roller coaster, I suppose. There's the model that I really like is a pretty classic model at this point. It's been talked about a lot, but it's called the 4 tasks of mourning. And the first one is acceptance. So if you are getting an AI to channel your mom to still talk to you, you might not have come to that sort of first part, which is your mom is gone. And just because it's normal and natural, by the way, doesn't mean it's easy, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
normal natural things can be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life, and I think that's what grief is. Sure, it's normal, sure it's natural, but it hurts in a way that we just that's hard to describe. Hard makes it hard for
mhm,
people to talk about. So first we have to accept that the person is gone. Second, we have to actually process the pain. So there isn't this, you can't actually skip it. You can't sweep it under the rug. You can't, I mean, I remember at Barry's funeral hearing all kinds of things like just focus on your work, or just go out and meet somebody new, or don't do things that remind you of him. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to stop looking at the color blue, I guess, and stop brushing my teeth.
mhm,
So it would have been better or more helpful if people had said to me what now we tell people by text, which is find a way to let it out. Like the
mm,
pain is real. We're here for you. Do you want to? And there are lots of different ways. Only about 10% of grievers actually seek out therapy. People, not therapy is not for everybody. It's not the only way to process pain at all. Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's screaming into the wind. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it is therapy. But stage 2 of Warden's task of mourning is like process it somehow.
mhm,
Go through it. Give yourself space. Sometimes we say, why don't you leave just a 15-minute window each day, and that just let it out then, and then try and go about other tasks. Because if you just try and go about other tasks, that processing time isn't there.
I want to jump in because this is where like this idea of repression comes in. I
Mm,
don't know if you've
mm-hmm,
heard of like body keeps the score
mm-hmm.
or this idea that if you don't express and like feel your feelings, then it can get stuck in the body. And I say it in this way where I'm like, is this woo woo? Does it have any science to back it? Um, Maybe this is more for another person. I don't know if you know anything about it, but that's a question that I have. Is this just something that's stuck and people talk about it, or is there any actual evidence?
A couple of years ago, I think there is reason to. So a couple of years ago, something called prolonged grief disorder was actually put into the DSM.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, a lot of bereavement people felt quite strongly that it shouldn't be because grief is a normal, natural response, right? It's not an illness that needs to be diagnosed. We don't need to put all grieving people onto antidepressants because task 2, process the pain, not numb the pain and pretend, put it away. But like all things, it's not that black and white. And there are people who get stuck in their grief, and
Mm-hmm.
the complexity and the pain overwhelm them for a long time. And it does seem to also then physically impact them. Not right. It's not just a mental and emotional journey. Just inflammation alone is very high. The first 6 months after a bereavement, the physical impacts are significant. So if you're bottling it up and just focusing on work and not saying his name and so on, like that, you're not you're not letting it move through you. So I'm not a clinician, but I think yes. And I think that a lot of this research on PGD, prolonged grief disorder, and complicated grief has some value because it's showing us that there are healthy things that we can do to not just process the pain and move through grief, but perhaps even come out. You said it at the beginning, Mary, where you were just saying like you see the world differently, you approach your work differently. So it is a natural journey that even has some upsides.
Mm-hmm.
You can come through stronger and with different perspective and so on. Um, so it's not, yeah,
No,
trying to not feel it doesn't seem to work very well. Yeah.
totally, totally. It's an interesting idea. And you brought up some of like the physical things that can happen when somebody is grieving or just lost, a spouse or a loved one. And I wanted to touch on those a little bit more. I did some research, and
Mm.
there was an interesting study from JAMA that in the first month after a spouse's death, um, the other spouse is twice as likely to suffer from an acute MI, heart attack, or stroke
Yeah.
compared to people that didn't just lose a spouse. And that is like, I knew it was higher, but twice as
Yeah.
likely is a staggering statistic.
Staggering. 1.4 times as likely to get a type 2 diabetes diagnosis
Mm,
in that same situation. Loss of a partner is particularly hard. It's particularly hard on men, perhaps because they're less likely to be doing some of the other things and more likely to be like, I'm just going to be strong and power through this. I don't want to talk
hmm
about it. Yeah, no, the physical stuff is real. One of the things that just, I, it just boggles my mind that this is not more than enough to make sure everyone gets grief support, period. 1 in 4 youth suicides are recently bereaved.
Mm,
1 in 4. So think about the money that we spend on youth suicide prevention, and then think about the money we spend on grief support for young people.
totally.
I mean, it's just, and again, it's not actually even that expensive. I think what our data shows is that for a lot of people, a small amount of support for a long time is enough. Just be with them on the journey and give people the best expertise we can. 1 in 4 youth suicides. But yet, if you're a person whose roommate died or mom died or something, good luck getting expert grief support. You
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah. I mean, that one hits home. So Ian has he has a story, and he had lost three best friends between the ages of, I think, probably 16 and 30 or
Oh,
something.
wow.
And I look back, because I really label his death. It was an overdose, but I don't label it necessarily an accidental overdose. There was an aspect to me that was almost like a parasuicide, and I'm not saying it was a suicide by any means. But when somebody has such risky behaviors so often, like there's another thing that I think that we need to be looking at there. And and when you just said that, I'm like, he didn't receive, I don't think, like the grief support that he needed through those deaths, and how important it is that young people get that. I think is, I mean, that stat is crazy. 1 in 4.
Crazy. That's really, thanks for sharing that. I have, I mean, now, of course, when I hear these things, I was in a meeting a few months ago with a woman whose teenage son died by suicide 6 months after her other son died by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, that's unfathomable, like to go through. I don't.
unfathomable. Um, I just actually wrote an article I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. And a few months ago, there was an attack at a festival. It was a Filipino festival, and somebody drove into the crowd and killed 11 people.
Mm,
And it turned out that the assailant's brother had just been murdered, and that there had been no support, no justice. In the wake of his brother's murder, his mom attempted suicide. And then the assailant himself was known to people to be having challenges with this, and no support given. And it made me think about the was it Memorial Hospital, February or March at UPMC Hospital, where the man walked into the hospital and tied up the staff and killed people, killed the doctors. And those doctors themselves said his wife died here last night and he was not well. I mean,
Wow.
these are extreme examples,
Extreme, yeah.
because now we're talking about also triggering violent behavior. But when you talk about Ian's, well, because what's not, like, on the other hand, the 1 in 4 statistic is just commonplace. That's not unusual. But these things also don't often get looked at. Like, what is the experience of the person who drove into the traffic in the first place, and what could we have done differently for him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one's gonna stick with me.
Mm,
I want to go into the physical stuff a little bit more. I think like there's a couple other things that hit me when I was doing this research.
mm,
And one is just the the overall risk for mortality. So we talked about
yeah.
myocardial infarction, heart attack, but there was a meta-analysis that looked at people who are widowed have a 41% higher risk of mortality over the first 6 months of their spouse passing.
Mm-hmm.
41% higher risk. And after 6 months, it still sticks around, but it's like 14% higher. And you mentioned this before, where it affects men greater
Mm-hmm.
than women. And I think that's two part. I think what you said, like, do they have as many outlets? But I also think there's probably a physical health implication where men are just more likely to have heart attacks than women, especially
Mm-hmm.
in younger years. And I'm saying that because the reason you're on my podcast is I just wanted to get your word out for sure, but this is also like a health longevity
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and people who are listening likely want to improve their health. And one thing that I always tell my patients is that when we're preventing health right now, it's almost like a retirement account,
Mm-hmm.
like a safety account, like a something to fall back on, because hard things can and will happen in life.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know when they're going to happen. We don't know what that's going to be. And I usually give the examples of, like, you could break a wrist and go, or break a leg and be, bedbound for a little bit. And then we want to have extra muscle on your body. But one thing that I have to add to my list is you could lose somebody, because that's a human experience and it's very likely going to happen if you are alive. Um, and this idea that your risk is going to increase, of your risk for high blood pressure
Mm-hmm.
increases when somebody dies, your risk for metabolic diseases increases. And can we make sure that everything's in line now and you're as healthy as possible, so that you have more vitality and cushion
Mm-hmm.
if and when something happens?
That's so well
But
put. And yes, and yes, a wholehearted yes. There are things that we can do. Absolutely. Gosh, I don't even know which place to start with that. But so, yes, there's increased morbidity and mortality,
mhm,
particularly so in the acute stages. One of the failings of traditional bereavement care is that often it is not even offered in the first 6 months. If you have limited therapy appointments, they want you to use just your 3 appointments when you're further down the road, but yet all your risks are even higher in those acute phases. And particularly for certain kinds of deaths, like parents when a child dies, for example. So we know, we have the data, we know when to worry and when to make interventions available. There's no shortage of data. It might be, maybe it's helpful to, because I was sort of starting with those 4 tasks of mourning, and the third one is about whether you can adapt. So, yes, you accept it, then you process your pain, and then stage 2 also tends to be one where, stage 3 is the adapting to your new reality, which is somewhere where I think is another one of the reasons that maybe men and women have a bit of a different experience. Like,
mm,
can you go to a dinner party without him, without her? Can you adapt to the new reality that you're living in? Because when we think about these mortality, morbidity, and health, negative health outcomes, one of the ways to minimize them is to adapt. What are you going to do differently in order to still have social connection, instead of to keep your sleep as regular as you can? Of course, our nutrition goes all over the place. Substance use goes all over the place. Like all the things that we're doing in that acute phase, we really liked whiskey at the beginning, like we do these things because we're trying to cope, but
Mm-hmm.
they're generally bad for us. But in fact, there are other things we can do that are generally good for us, like social connection, like processing the pain, whether in the gym or out in nature or whatever it is that you need to give yourself space to let it out. So, and why not have it like building extra muscle mass for when you break your leg? Just be ready for
Yeah.
it. Be informed. Know the things that you can do, and they help. They help a lot. The fourth task of mourning is building an enduring connection with the deceased. So this looks like a lot of things for a lot of different people. But again, for people listening here who are the kind of people who want to, what can I do? What can I do about it? One of the tasks of mourning is to find an enduring connection. Now it's called something else, continuing bonds. But the idea is maybe participate in a charity that Ian really valued. Maybe you wear something of his around your neck. Maybe you have a little area in the house, which is where you put things for him. Maybe you, you know, do your favorite walk together. The walk that you used to do together, do once a month on that date. But this idea that we can actually minimize our negative health outcomes is a huge deal, because more skyrockets. It's a really risky time. So do your best to process the pain, do your best to adapt to your new reality, even if it's really, really hard to say yes when someone invites you to the pub because you just haven't left the house in 2 weeks. Just really try to do it. And then find a way to have this connection over time with your person.
You started a company.
Yeah, I might have taken it I might have taken it a bit too far.
You're crushing that one.
But I mean, this work is healing for me every day.
Yeah.
Today is actually the anniversary of Barry's death,
Oh,
and
wow.
I normally take the day off, but I wanted to chat with you, and it's been a long time, and it's fine. But I think that a huge part of my healing has been that I just feel like I'm doing something useful. Like, what am I doing about it?
So useful. Yeah. First of all, thank you for being here on his death anniversary. I feel really honored, and yeah, and I'm just glad that this is getting out to people, hopefully, who it will affect, and almost be a legacy. I don't know if you feel like that at all, but it's definitely touching people. When you told me what you did and what Help Text was about, the first thing I was like, I wish I had this.
Yeah.
Like, it was a no-brainer that I was like, I wish. Because I remember the first time I went to a therapist after he died was about 2 years after his passing, and it felt really quick. I felt like and then I look back, I was like, that was 2 years after. It was like the first time that I talked to a professional about it. I can laugh about it now,
I
but I'm
know,
like,
but
yeah, some text would have been nice in the first like few months
but
for
no one
sure.
can, at the beginning, that's what text is great, because it's a very low threshold. Even if you can't tie your shoes, even if you can't complete a crossword, even if you're nowhere near being ready to go and sit in a therapist's office, you can certainly get a couple texts a week with some little gems of wisdom that say his name and help you along the way, right? So I think the low threshold part is really important. When I started the company, I naively thought that people would sign up when someone died. And
Hmm.
no, well, a third of people do sign up in those acute first 3 months. About a third of our subscribers globally do sign up in that early stretch. But sometimes they come 20 years after. They come when they're in
Mm.
pain. They'll come and say, my mom died when I was a teenager, and now I'm 40. And we have texts from experts who actually focus on motherless daughters and what the experience is to become the age that your mom was
Mm.
when she died, and to look in the mirror and see yourself, see her looking back at you. And so our texts are really nuanced for all these different kinds of situations, but also to your point, they're low threshold, and also to your point, whenever. 2 weeks in, 2 days, 2 days after a traumatic death, we're still there for you. We've got you. Or 20 years after your mom died, that also works. I think it's just very easy, which is what you need when you're overwhelmed and grieving. And yeah, it takes a long time to, I don't, my friends found me a therapist and I remember them like basically pouring me into the car and then pouring me out of it to get me there. I just couldn't function on my
Yeah,
own.
there's this. I remember talking to the therapist actually, and I vividly remember telling him, I feel like my bottom half of my body is in cement. And I used to be like a runner where, I was starting a company, I was finishing school, like I felt like I was moving really quickly. He
Mm,
died and I was like in cement. I was like,
mm,
I feel like my legs weigh 1,000,000 pounds and I can't move. Like in various aspects of my life where it's like my business really slowed down. I had
mm.
no idea. I started to question life as we know it and like how I want to operate in this world and what my values actually are. But yeah, just this feeling of like, uh, I mean, that's why I didn't find a therapist. It was like, that feels like a big task that I don't have time for.
So for you, it sounds like the body kept the score a little, kept you, your legs wouldn't move after being a runner. So
Yeah.
that I think tells us a thing or two about the impacts on our physical body as well as on our minds. So I was curious about what you said at the beginning. Like how like now, how would you say it has impacted the work you do and your values, and what changed for you, do you think?
Yeah, so when Ian passed away, I had just finished school, just graduated, and had started a business and was moving to LA. And I would say I was living like a fast paced life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really interested in building and growing and making money and like participating in capitalism. um, and it's funny because I grew up very differently, and him and I met on an island that was 3 miles by 7 miles, where we lived together in a family's house who took us
Oh
in.
wow.
And I was bartending. We didn't have Wi-Fi. Like we were like living a very simple life.
Hmm.
And I loved it. Like looking back at like some of the best years of my life were on that island, just, hiking and being at the beach and laughing with friends and playing beach volleyball.
Mm.
And I had left that and found myself in a very different place where I think I was unsure of what really brought me joy in life anymore, but I also got kind of just caught up in keeping up with the Joneses. And when he died, I remember having this like reality check of like, is this really what you want? Like, are these actually your values, or are you starting to mesh with the people that are around you? And because he used to call me out, so we'd be on the phone. He's like, you're getting pretty LA. I don't know if this is you. And
Because he knew the
everything that
previous you. Yeah.
he knew the previous me, yeah. And so I really started to reevaluate, how do I want to show up here? What actually matters to me? And for me, it's like friendships and community matter the most. And I'm really lucky because right now I have like a really rich community. But to this day, if I have the option of going to do something that could better my career or spending it one on one with, my best friend, like it's an obvious
Hmm.
choice for me most of the time. And I still find myself making stupid choices once in a while. I'm not perfect by any means, but um that one of the biggest things that I realized is like the little things in life that used to bother me, I can more easily say I'm not gonna lose sleep over that because, and this one I'm curious if you've resonated at all or understand, but I used to get so worked up over like some little things, and now I can be like, well, at least they're not dead. Or, like make light of it, just being like, well, at least I'm not back where I was when Ian died. Like that
Yeah.
was really bad.
Yeah.
So there's this like comedic parody of life as I know it being have been through some like really dark, dark times personally, and it
Yeah.
makes other things look not so bad
Yeah.
anymore.
I definitely have that, which I think is mostly a positive. Um, when someone's like, you know, my kid broke my favorite glass, I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to say. I can't even really feign empathy. I mean, I try, but it's just a glass. I also you also made me think of something else that I remember feeling at the beginning and imagining that I would go through some stages and it would go away. But at the beginning, I thought, I'm never going to be lighthearted again. Nothing
Mm,
is ever going to feel lighthearted. I believed that I would be happy again, like somehow, some way. And I believed mostly that I would get through it, but I never thought that I could be lighthearted or that little, I don't know.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and in a way, I was right. In a way, small talk remains difficult for me. I'm kind of more happier really having this conversation with you than trying to, schmooze at a cocktail party because, like, I don't know, because little things are just little. I don't really
Totally. No,
want
I,
to
I
talk
completely
about
resonate.
like the new tiles they chose for their kitchen or I mean, that's an overstatement, but something like that. Like a kind of, yeah, like this definitely not sweating the small stuff, but also preferring to spend my time doing things that make a difference, even if that's what I'm doing tonight, which is going to a 2 hour line dancing lesson with my girlfriends because we're like, okay, it's August 14th, let's do something.
Yeah.
Like prioritizing, that doesn't mean not doing goofy things, but as you said, doing things one on one with your friends versus things that at the end of the day don't really matter.
Yeah. No, and I completely, the small talk for me hits home where I'm like, I feel like I sometimes get labeled like as a bitch or something because I'm just like, I can't, like, I literally can't do this. I would rather do anything else but this right now.
One of the things that's
Um,
awesome about working at Help Text and with my team and with all these thanatologists and grief and loss people is that not only are grief and loss people generally empathetic, kind people, but they also just want to get shit done. Like,
mhm.
there's also this sort of matter of factness. So I don't think it's unique to you and me. I think that in general, it does lead people to a different level of what matters, what can I do about it? I'm going to put this aside because I can't do anything about it. Um, yeah, I don't think that's bitchy. I just think that's,
Phew.
purposeful.
It's a nice way to look at it. Um, okay, one thing, there's some doctors who listen to this podcast, and for my own, I think I can learn something from you here as well. But when somebody comes into our office and they say, I've lost somebody, or, that they're explaining that they just recently had somebody pass away, I think it's an important thing for us to think about what questions we should ask them to really understand what they're going through. And there's some obvious ones, but I would love to hear your take, and I can like sprinkle some things in there as well as like what are the non-obvious ones to ask somebody. And it may be in a doctor's office, but it also might just be a friend, right? Like to check in on somebody, how they're doing, the things that we may not think about.
Love the question. And the awesome thing about this is that this is the muscle building, the same as after you break. Like at the same time that you're doing this for someone else, you're practicing what you're going to do for yourself when the
Mm,
time comes. This is the skill building part. Um, if I were if I were a doctor and someone came into my office and said that someone had died, you can probably guess what the first thing I would ask them is. I would ask what the person's name was and what was one of your favorite things about your mom, and just talk about her. Um,
yeah. Yeah. And I feel like doctors sometimes go into clinical questions. And so I think that's such an important piece
yeah,
of like,
just
be human.
just stop and ask about them. And that's not just there is some clinical reasoning here, and there are different, scales that people use. But if the person cannot tell you, then you know that they haven't yet accepted the loss and they're not adapting. So you're also learning something. You're flexing your muscle and learning how to just ask this question and sit as a human. But also you're finding out if they can tell you. Sometimes we have someone start to sign a sign up process, and then my subscriber support team will go out and say, "Hi, we saw you started to sign up." And invariably, this is men whose wives have died. They'll just say, I can't type her name in. I'll try again next week." But they just can't do it.
Yeah. They can't do it. Yeah.
So I think, not to oversimplify, but that's my number one recommendation, and it accomplishes two things at once, and you're finding out where they are in their journey. And then once you've talked about the person, I probably would ask things about their sleep. Do they have people close to them that they can talk to? If someone has social connection and anybody that they feel comfortable talking to, their chances of all those negative outcomes dramatically decreases. So do you have anyone you can talk to about this? Are you sleeping okay? Do your best to drink lots of water.
For sleep, it's 25% of people who are bereaved fit the criteria for clinical insomnia. Super common.
25%. Wow. Yeah. I mean, my sleep was terrible. I couldn't get to sleep. Then I had quite traumatic dreams, and I couldn't get back to sleep because the dreams were, it was just terrible. So I would be one of that 25% for sure. So I think a reminder about the basics, sleep, nutrition makes sense, but the big one is social connection. If people have even one person that they feel that they can actually talk to about what they're feeling, or even just sit with, or go to the gym with, or whatever, their outcomes are going to be better. So I would start, if the person is early on in their grief, I would start there. And my other thing is that I would, we only use the word died. We don't say passed away or lost. We have a content guide, which has words that we don't use. And one is still. We would never say, "I'm sorry, you're still feeling that way," or "Oh, you're still having trouble with your sleep." There's no still. Your child died. You are always and forever going to live and miss them. This is a natural progression that you're on. So as a clinician, I think if you can build the muscle around, "I'm so sorry she died," because the person knows they died. They don't think that she was lost or passed away, or it's like they died, and you may have been there when they died. Because we don't like talking about it.
We don't want to say it. Yeah, we don't want to say it. Okay.
But Ian died, right? That's the reason you had a primal response. He's not missing. We talk about this with children, so we have a lot of texts that are for parents and guardians supporting grieving children. We also have a whole teen series. You don't want to tell a child that their grandfather is lost. They're not lost. They died. And you can talk about how things die. Plants die. It's a child's response usually will be curiosity. What does that mean? How does it work? Try and answer it that way. All the other phrases I don't think are helpful to anyone.
They don't do it justice.
They don't do it justice. That's actually a really good way of putting it. They don't do it justice. They're not missing.
Right. Yeah, it's like this sugarcoating that we do especially in the US. I don't know if other cultures do it, but it's like, and it's funny because I'm such a straightforward person, but I use passed away.
Yeah, you've used it a few times in this conversation. Yeah.
Totally. And I just haven't been aware of it. Yeah. I'm never going to use those words again. But I'm like,
maybe I should do a little, it would be kind of a cool little, because we just use it internally, our subscriber support team, this list of language, but maybe it's actually kind of a useful thing for clinicians and even therapists. Most therapists aren't trained in grief and loss. That's why we're constantly misdiagnosing people with depression and putting them onto meds that make them not process the pain, which then leads to more, complicated journeys over time, because therapists don't know what to say either.
Right. No,
So
I've never heard this concept
so I
before,
should
and
maybe do
I'm
like a
like,
little cheat sheet or something.
send
Still,
it to me
still,
first. Yeah.
and died, and should. There's no should.
Should.
We don't use should in our text. You should just go out and meet someone new. Should I?
Yeah.
Is that what I should
Right.
do?
Yeah.
Like, do you think? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just try to. We do. So our texts are we have a. I mean, we were first in the world to be published actually writing about grief-informed texting. So we've got really good data in places like Death Studies and the Omega Journal of Death and Dying, where we actually kind of architect a text, because the magic of it is, because on the one hand, it's the simplest thing in the world. Take the best expertise and text it to people with tailored for them. That's it. It's not rocket science. However, by the time we work with an expert, craft a message, tailor it, check our pronouns, does it translate into all 28 languages, and actually publish it into the system, we've spent a few hours at least on a message. And to the user, it has to just read like a text. It has to give you that little dopamine lift that comes with when you get a text message, and then now you feel a bit more cared for and you're more motivated because you're having this dopamine lift. And now we're going to say something hopefully pragmatic, but also normalizing. So the first part of the text will just acknowledge the pain that you're in, where you are, no should, no still, no nothing. And then go to the pragmatic tip. You can't just tell someone, you should just go for a long walk. First hear where they are, and then offer up the suggestion, still without the should on it.
No should. No should. I mean, that's a word that like we can take out aside from
Yeah, we could just get rid of
grieving
that
and things like
in
it's a
general.
tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're making me think of, so you said, go to the pub if you can kind of thing. And the one thing I would add to that is when Ian died, I was going to say passed away again. He
I
died
saw your lips move to
when
the P and then shift. Yep, nice. Good job. When he
muscle
died.
activated.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he died, I had a friend who showed up fully for me. I mean, I had many, many, many friends, but this was a friend who I wasn't super close with. And I look back at how he showed up, and sometimes he would just invite me out to things he was doing like all the time. Like, hey, we're doing this. Come, we're doing this. And I wouldn't always go, but I would sometimes go. And I think that he knew what he was doing looking
Hmm.
back, because I was like, wow, just offering
Mm-hmm.
things to distract me and get me out. And
Mm-hmm.
like, even if, now he wouldn't necessarily invite me to those things, I think it was a really sweet, thoughtful, caring thing to do, is because I was new to LA. So I actually didn't
Yeah.
have a friend group here.
Yeah, he was doing all
Um,
kinds of things right. So I don't think
mhm.
I said this at the beginning, but because my core origin story was not really about me getting grief support, but it was about friends and family not knowing what to do and say. When I built the platform, we built it such that every single subscription includes everything that we've been talking about: personalized tips, clinically sound for you around stillbirth if you've had a stillbirth. But we also text friends, family, managers, bosses, your mom. If you invite people into the subscription and if they agree, we will also send them tips all year.
Mm,
And we actually have a tip that we send about keep inviting them. Don't take it personally if they don't come. Don't expect a response, but just keep inviting her and let her know that these things are there. So your friend is doing a masterful job of one of the things that we suggest, which is don't take it personally, but keep inviting them and nudge them along. And like if we're texting a colleague, we'll say, Mary's probably really nervous about coming back to work. Do you want to offer to pick her up the first day so that she's not walking through the door alone?
sweet.
How
Yeah.
about talking to the other people at work and to her to see how she would like people to respond when she gets there? Like just tips to
Yeah.
do what your
Talk about
friend
it.
to do what your friend did really well. Yeah.
What other things like that, if you know somebody who is grieving, things that we may not think about that are really helpful for them? You've mentioned so many during this podcast, which I think is
One of the
invaluable.
things that I think is really a cool thing to think about is at the beginning, try to think, what is something that I can do? What is like easily and repeatedly over time, instead of offering or trying to do like some big thing early on that's awkward for you. If you live nearby, just say, hey, I'm going to start bringing your bins out on garbage day until you tell me otherwise, because I can do that easily and I can do it repeatedly and comfortably. So try to think of something that you can do more than once and over time. Like, just, you know what, I'm going to be the person that keeps inviting her to come and do things. Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be the person that just sends a text from the grocery store to see if there's anything I can pick up. You don't have to say anything about the grief or anything. Just kind of build in a habit, like everything else, like with all good, healthy. But I think it's good advice. If you're a person who is good at talking about difficult things, be that person. If you're a person who likes gardening, help with that part. Just come and trim the flowers when they all start wilting, and maybe bring a plant that's actually going to live longer to replace it, or sort of play to your strengths. That's what I think.
And I think you may not even notice that you're doing this, but you're suggesting things that you are going to do for the person versus saying, hey, what can I do for
Yeah,
you right
that's,
now?
yeah,
When the person has no
no
idea,
idea.
doesn't have the time. I didn't have the patience, but like just
Yeah.
to think about that
No, there's
too.
like, absolutely. I'm sure that you had the same experience. But so I was living in London, living my best life when Barry died. I was like doing all this like, amazing, like women in tech stuff. Like everything was amazing. And when he died, I was like, I can't even live here. I don't know anybody. Like,
Mhm.
and so I got on a plane and moved to Vancouver, and a couple of my girlfriends like met me at the airport and had tried to find me a place to live. And so we got to this completely barren apartment, and they said, "Okay, so, what do you need? Like, what can we do?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm good." And they're like,
I'm
"Well, do you
good.
have
This is perfect.
like, how can we help?" And people would ask, "How can you help? Do you have bedding? No. Any food? No. Toilet paper? Nope. No." So yeah, asking the person is just tasking with them. Their brain is completely occupied and they can't come up with the to-do list that you're asking for. So just think of a thing you can do easily and do it. And the other thing, which I don't think we've talked about, which I think is really important for supporters, um, is to remove the idea entirely that you're going to make them feel better.
Yeah.
If you go to your friend's house whose child has just died and you think that your job is to cheer them up or make them feel better, you are putting so much pressure on yourself to accomplish the completely impossible, right? So I think that's another thing. Find something you can do easily and over time, but also just recognize that you're not going to make them feel better at all. And that's
And they
not,
may not want to actually feel
they
better
might
in the
not want to
moment.
feel
Like
better. Yeah.
they're not inviting you over to be like, I hope I feel better after Susie leaves. Like that's not
Yeah. Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
probably their goal either. It's
Yeah.
just connecting
And feeling
and just
less
having
alone,
somebody.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's
Yeah, I
another
used to have
part
a
is just,
friend.
oh, go, yeah.
I used to have a friend where I would just go watch a movie with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just having somebody next to me,
Mm-hmm.
like that I felt like I wasn't alone, but we weren't talking. And yeah, there wasn't this expectation of this person has something wise to tell me that's going to make me feel better. Quite the
Yeah.
opposite, actually. I was like, I don't want you to tell me anything right now.
Yeah. But just sit
Um,
there by me and do it. I remember talking to one woman whose husband died, and she said that for maybe 3 weeks, people started a meal train and dropped off casseroles at her front door.
hmm,
And so she had gone from two people in the house to one person in the house, and from eating with her husband to eating alone. And 3 weeks is how long this meal train lasted. And every single day there'd be this massive amount of food that she could not, in any universe, possibly consume. And not once did anyone ring the doorbell and offer to come in and eat the food with her.
hmm. Oh,
I
missed opportunity.
missed
But
opportunity.
I kind of get it on
I
their side too, where
know.
they think that
I
she
know.
doesn't want anybody there. I'm
I
so glad you're
know.
saying this because
I remember this was early. I remember having this conversation quite early after starting the company, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's so." I get it on both sides, and we've all been in these meal trains. We're all in meal train, and it's not that people don't. Some people absolutely the top thing that they want is like they've still got to feed their kids, and their husband's just died, and drop off the mac and cheese, and like it's not. I'm not saying don't deliver food. Um,
totally.
that's a really helpful thing for a lot of people, but it also speaks to what again your friend did wisely, which is just sit and watch the movie with me. Just
Hmm.
ring the bell. I don't have to answer the door, but maybe I do, and just say, "Hey, I just brought you some chicken salad. Um, if you're hungry, I'm happy to come and sit with you for a bit, or just pop it in the fridge." But that's not what we
Yeah.
do.
No, it's not what we do because we're so afraid of imposing on people,
Mm-hmm.
or we're afraid of maybe they don't want it. And I think what's interesting is usually when people have somebody really close to them die, most people, maybe this isn't true, but for me, I was like, I would just tell you I want to be alone. Like I didn't feel the need to sugarcoat at that
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, and we just have to let people decide for themselves what's best for them
Yeah, and
too.
just follow their lead. So we also send texts like that early in the process. Just follow their lead. It's not your job to cheer them up. Ask if they want to talk about their mom.
Mhm.
Tell them that you remember. Oh my gosh, your mom was so hilarious that time when she took us water skiing. I'll always remember that.
Memories,
When
shared
you, yeah,
experiences.
because you're letting them keep the person in their mind. So
Mhm.
it's actually really easy to do once you get used to it. Truly,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah, the muscle I love that you're using this analogy of the muscle and that even as we're talking, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm getting better at
Get doing
this.
it.
I can do it.
And again, like
Um,
I also do think that you're building the muscle, it's a bit self-serving too because you're practicing.
mhm.
Practice in the world with other people, and you're going to be better prepared when your time comes, when your knees buckle.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's few certainties in the world, but one of them is that we are going to die and we're going to have loved ones that pass away. And so you're right. It's this preparation of how do we show up for others and how do we prepare ourselves to understand how we want others to show up for us.
Mm, love that. Hmm.
About a positive outcome that you had as a result of grief. And I know this sounds like a strange thing, but you introduced it earlier where, you know, after Ian died, I had some things that positively came out of it. I'm interested in your experience with that.
I would never trade my grief experience. It's an interesting thought for someone who was contemplating cutting off arms and legs in order to bring Barry back to life. And I don't mean Barry being alive. I wish Barry was alive. But given that he isn't, I actually wouldn't trade the experience at all. I think it's made my life richer and better in every way. I take nothing for granted. I live very fully. Um, every day I want to make a difference and have fun and hug my kids, and I don't sweat the small stuff. I think it's made me stronger, but also softer. I think I'm a more patient person than I was before.
Hmm.
I think it made me a better parent. Um, yeah, stronger and softer. I think both of those things are equally true. Like I'm a gentler person with myself and others probably than I was before, but also pretty tough and resilient. Takes a lot
Yeah.
to knock me
Yeah, just
down.
this knowing that you've been through really hard things and can probably go through some more hard
Mm,
things if you had to. For a realist too, I would
that's
say
the
like
thing.
you're
Hmm.
keeping me in line. You're like, you're gonna go through it again. He died. Like, let's be real here. When Ian passed away, I did a million different things, right? Like I did breath work and I did psychedelics and I did therapy and like all these things. But I did a breath work session, which if you've never done holotropic breath work, it can almost be this spiritual psychedelic experience just with the breath, but I got this download of a mantra that came to me. And it was, I love you, I miss you, and thank you. And in terms of what you just said, where I would never get rid of my
Mm,
grief story. I wish Ian was here every single day. And if there was anything
mm,
I could do to get him back, I probably would. And I have this deep, deep, deep gratitude for experiencing his death and grief in the way that I did, that ultimately, I mean, everything that you said resonated with me, but made myself better. If he had not died, I can imagine, yeah, things not have shifting as quickly in terms of my priorities in life and my values and how I interact with people in the world.
mm,
Um, and so I resonate a lot with what you said.
mm. Yeah, I have gratitude too. Well, because I'm really lucky
Yeah.
that both my parents are still here, but they're in their
Yeah.
80s.
Um,
Bit for it as well. It's making me think of, I mean, this is not quite what you asked, but you're making me remember just when you're talking about different things that you did when Ian died. So the worst thing that I did was I went to a weekend group, um,
mm,
grief support group. And, um, but the reason that it was bad became a big part of my determination, I think. So this was a group for people whose loved one had died by
mm.
suicide. I was about 6 months in. And when everyone introduced themselves at the beginning, all the other people, it was all women. There were no men. It was all women grieving men. That wasn't by design. That's just how it was, because more
Yep.
men die by suicide and more women go to group session. Um, but they were all the mothers and sisters of the deceased, and they all, to some degree or another, blamed the spouse. So things like, she should have known, she didn't tell us, or she was making him miserable, or all the way through to, I've reopened the police investigation because I think she could have pushed him. And I was sitting there going, but you just told me there was a note. Um, it was a horrible, horrible weekend. Uh, it led to what I describe as my guilt year, where at times I thought of myself as having been responsible somehow for Barry's death, even though I knew I was um, a good wife to a troubled person. But it also put this thing deep in me, which was like, I'm never going to do what's happening here. None of these words will ever leave my lips. I will not be reopening investigations and blaming other people and holding this anger, because people were 10 years hence and 15 years hence in that weekend group. So it was like this really bad experience that also just showed me the sort of like hazards of grief and how hard we'll work to blame someone else, or to, because you don't want it to be your son made this terrible decision that has hurt you and will hurt you forever. It's not
And
really what you asked, bad things, but I don't know. It's just reminding me of what I do have gratitude for it, but I also learned some things not to do, which I think actually are
yeah,
a
and I
big
think
part
it
of who I am now.
highlights a few things in terms of if you've been through this, or maybe you will go through this at some point, where when somebody dies, I think it's very natural to want to blame something, anything, like figure it out. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
had a thing of like, I wanted to see the autopsy, like, I wanted to see his blood levels. You know what I mean? Like, your brain just wants to attach to some level of
Mm-hmm.
like certainty.
I did that too. I did that too. Exactly
I had
that.
a lot of, yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
like some certainty of like, this couldn't, what, I had other explanations. Like, your brain does really weird things, but if you give it the oxygen in the air, then I can see how that can really lead to things that can harm other individuals, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't imagine being you in that situation, just hearing those stories. And because I blamed myself as well. And I think that's
Oh, it was awful.
a
Yeah.
common thing where like, could we have done something different? What if I had did this? What if I had done that? What if I had called him back? Did he try? I looked through my phone. I was like, did he try to call?
Mm-hmm.
There's all this stuff that circulates and it
I did
eats
that
at you.
too.
And
Yeah.
so to give people just this like almost warning of, um, yeah, is this how you want to process it, leaving somebody else feeling worse than they possibly already can in this situation?
Yeah, I did that. The blood levels, I did all kinds of, yeah, scrolling through phone records. I remembered that he had called me when I was on the tube because we were living in London and I couldn't get signal. And, what if we have one of the messages that we send to people supporting someone after a suicide or an overdose is, you know, she already has a million questions. So
Mm,
this isn't the
mm-hmm.
time to ask her more of them. Her brain is full of unanswered questions. The thing is to come to terms with unanswered questions as opposed to trying to find answers for them all. I had this. So Barry hanged himself in a park, and a man was out at 6 o'clock in the morning walking his dog, Rusty, and came upon Barry in the tree. And he after the funeral, I couldn't even go to the park, but my mom and my friend had gone, and this man happened to be there just at the tree himself, and he went over and introduced himself and said, "Are you by any chance the family of the young man that I found here last week?"
Yeah.
So that's how I came
Wow.
to know Don. Don Hobus is his name, who I came to know. I mean, he like traveled to Vancouver when my first son was born. I mean, I ended up having like a relationship with this man. Um, and one of the benefits, other than the obvious social connection with him, was around this sort of unanswered questions and putting things to rest. So I really, really needed to know what about the rope that he had used. Barry and I camped a lot, and he had some. He was very proud of his rope. It was like this. I forget what it's called, but it's from parachutes, so it was really thin but really strong. And it's what we would use for rigging things up when we were camping. And I just had this horrible thought that he had used this rope, which would mean that he had planned it before he left town and had it weeks in advance and so on. And in the end, I worked my courage up to ask Don, the man in the park. And he said, because by this point he had come to know me a little bit, he said, "Oh no, it was brand new red rope. Matched his t shirt."
Matched his t-shirt. I can't. Uh,
And I was so, like this tiny little like bit of information let me know that no, he had made this decision at some later point than this particular thread, and he had gone out and bought this rope. And um, yeah, the inclination to find someone or something to blame, and also, as I saw in the group session, also the determination to not blame that
right.
person who
Yeah.
died by suicide in this case. So it's like somebody is to blame, but no blame whatsoever sits with my
Yeah.
brother
I
or my
mean, we
son.
put people on a pedestal who have died a lot of the
Um,
times, and I've definitely found myself in that where I
it's like you have to, yeah. And I'm sure you talk about grieving both you have to grieve
mm,
the good parts and the bad, the bones of the fish as well. Barry was not perfect. He had a
mm-hmm.
lot of, obviously, mental health, well, maybe not obviously, but he had mental health challenges and
Yeah.
other things. Um, so it was but yeah, I was one of the people that I even said it at the funeral. I came across the speech that I actually read. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever written or said out loud in my life when I read it, years later. But one of the things I said was that I've forgiven him already. I was basically pleading everybody at
Mm,
the funeral to not be angry with him because I couldn't stand the
mm-hmm.
thought of people being angry with him. So I just said, um, you know, please don't be angry with him, and I've forgiven
Was
him
that true?
already.
Yeah.
Not even close. I wanted it to be true.
Yeah.
No, my anger year
Yeah.
was like year 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting how our brains try to things if you had to make sense of, adapt, survive through these things that are unfathomable, unimaginable, and yet happen to all of us at some point in different ways and different times. And I really think that one of the cool things that you
Mm-hmm.
guys are doing is helping us talk about it, because I think that's one of the biggest things we don't talk, like I haven't talked about this with somebody else who has lost somebody like you have in a really long time, and it's so therapeutic just to be like, oh wow, me looking for blood levels like isn't super crazy, like other people have done that, like I got some more stuff too that I can let you know about, but like
Yeah.
but it's all, yeah,
That'll be like offline. Crazy things we did. But the blood level really mattered to me. I was like, look, like what time, like
yeah,
what was he drunk? That's what I actually wanted to know. Had he been drinking when he died? I wished that I kind of wanted the answer to be yes, because I thought then maybe it might have been less painful. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
The answer was no
yeah.
in the end, but yeah, no, not crazy. That's the things we do.
Help Text is an awesome service. I shouldn't say excited, but I'm really happy that it exists.
I'm excited. It's
Um,
exciting.
it's exciting. Yeah, well, you
It's
know what I mean.
okay.
I'm
I
like,
know. I know.
can't wait. But it's such a beautiful thing that you've brought into this world, and I really appreciate all the work that you've put into it. And I think it's helping so many people. I'm actually about to sign somebody up for it myself, and I'm just grateful that there is this thing that exists to
Yeah.
help people during this really, really vulnerable, impactful, life-changing time of their lives. How do people find out more about it? Where do they go? Can you sign up loved ones for it? Do you suggest that? Do you suggest they sign themselves up? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm really proud of it too. And I, we actually do feel excited when we have a subscribe support portal. So we see every time someone comes in and you feel sad, but you also think, oh, here's another opportunity to
Hmm.
help. Oh,
Hmm.
here's another, here's another person. So we work with lots and lots of organizations, hospices, organ donation, churches, universities, organizations buy packages of texts and then they offer them out to bereaved families. But you can also just sign up yourself, helptext.com. And we're on all the channels as help texts, plural texts.
Hmm.
And yes, we have gift subscriptions. I think they're a wonderful gift subscription. You can only have so many bouquets of flowers. We have quite a few people that say that we're their go-to sympathy gift. And it's a pretty thoughtful way to say, here, I get it. This is tough, and maybe this will be helpful. Sign up when you're ready. You can do that at Help Texts. We've set up your code at Dr. Mary Party as well, where people can go. And yeah, it's super simple. So 4 minutes to sign up, you get your first text right away. Like it really is very, very simple. For gifts, sorry to answer your question, we'll guide you in language to offer it as a gift, but the person themselves will fill the form in because they'll share if they're comfortable, their person's birthday, which holidays are important to them. They need to actually fill the form in, but it just takes them a few minutes and we'll give you some gift language as you go.
Okay, so you guys have a process for that in terms of if you want to gift this to somebody that you can pay for it
Yeah.
and it's going to have the person actually sign themselves up, that's really smart. And I'm glad that that exists.
Yeah.
And the code that we have is help text plural .com/ Dr. Mary Party. And so if anybody has anybody who they think that would benefit from this, and I think it's interesting that you said it doesn't have to be if you just lost somebody, it could be at any point in their grieving journey, which if it's somebody that's close, I mean, that grieving journey doesn't end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anytime. We'll take the timeline into account. We do also have support for caregivers, people caring for someone who is dying, someone with a terminal diagnosis. So that's called anticipatory grief. A really, really beautiful support. So if you're caring for your wife who has Alzheimer's, for example, we'll text you there when they die. when they die, it transitions to bereavement care, pet loss, pregnancy loss. We can help with all kinds of. What I tell my team is the harder it is, the better we are at it. So
Hmm. And you and I met, well, I'll mention this briefly because I didn't want to make the podcast about this, but you and I met because I don't know if we're working on a project together, but I'm helping you guys in a project that you're leading in Help Text, which is this new longevity branch of getting texted information about longevity, whether it's women or men. Can you
mhm.
talk a little bit about that? And you can use the same code, I think, right, for that as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let me make sure that's true, but I think so. Yeah, it's really cool. So originally what happened was that Matt Caberlin used our pet loss texts. So his dog died. He was using our pet loss texts. And then he invited me on his pod to talk about grief. And then after that, we were like, wait, if this works so well for grief, would it also work really well for longevity? Texting out messages about resilience and social connection and science and so on. So yeah, we built it. So now there's longevity texts, and super grateful to be working with you and to have crafted texts with you. So when people sign up with your code, they will get messages from you, but also from Matt and other longevity experts. And we just launched it. It's exciting, I think, to see how text can be used because it's kind of about habit forming and nudges and doing healthy things. And because we're, what Matt said originally, and he's right, is that we're both clinical and pragmatic, even with our grief
Mm,
support. And so that's something that we have in common, right? Like, send it, we meaning the grief people and longevity people. What's like, let's cut through the misinformation. We tell people there aren't stages, give people
mhm.
practical tips. And yeah, in this case, it's for improving health span, different messages for women than men. You can choose from a whole list of additional requested resources. You can choose to come in as a generalist or more of a deep dive, messages around everything from hormones to supplements and so on.
Yeah, and I'm excited to be a participant in that, and I'm really grateful that you guys asked me. And I will say, like, when we got on the call, I left not with thinking about like, oh, I can't wait to write all these help texts. Like, I can, and I'm again, I love it, and I'm really really happy to be part of it. But I was like, I got to get this woman on my podcast, and we have to talk about grief because yeah, it's affected my life so much, and I know it's affected so many people, or it will affect so many people. And you speak so eloquently on it, and I can just feel your heart in it. And so, thank you for everything that you're doing. It's
Oh,
been a real
thanks.
pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks for sharing your story and Ian's story too. I think that it makes a big difference for people to connect to the work that way. So glad we met.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Emma. Have a great day.